Ben Lee, welcome to Radical Wealth Plan.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Obviously, you've had a great real estate sales career. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about your investment in real estate. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the first thing that you did was buy a note. Mm-hmm. And so I know your dad was a lawyer. Okay,
I'm going to tell you, it is a crazy story. I'm a first year in law school. Okay. And I was always interested in real estate. My dad had bought and sold some apartments over the years. And we're talking 5-unit, 3-unit, 8-unit, smaller buildings, but cool stuff. And he had talked to me for years about, back of the envelope, numbers. Mm-hmm. This is what the cash flow looks like. Mm-hmm. So I always was interested in real estate, and my dad knew it. And he was a lawyer. He said, I have a client who her late husband subdivided a bunch of land in unincorporated Acton in Antelope Valley. Mm-hmm. And she, over the years, has sold off. He had sold off all the lots, but he had carried notes, and she got rid of everything. She got everyone to pay off the notes except for one. The debtor, the owner, owed her $90,000. And my dad and she wanted out of it. So my dad said, "Hey, Ben, I think I could kind of make this deal for you. You're in law school. I think I can get it for you for 50. And I was like, 90? Wait, 50 for 90? That sounds awesome. So I said, I don't have $50,000. And he said, I've got a line of credit on my house, and I'm going to loan you the money. Just you pay off the line of credit when you can. And you'll pay the interest and you pay the line of credit. He basically put me into that deal. Okay. And I got the note, and it was in arrears the second I bought it. This is why she wanted out of it. And I was like, I'm going to go foreclose. I'm going to be a cowboy. I'm going to get this, property. I'm going to sell it for more money. And my father-in-law, was an amazing lawyer, he said, "Hey, Ben, Ron, I won't mention names, down the street, he is a hard money lender. And he maybe can help you with this property." And I said, great. And so I go by his office, and he's doing loans. He's making loans here and there, and foreclosing and working out deals. And I said, this is what I did. And he looks at the paperwork. He looks at all this stuff, and he says, here's what's going to happen, Ben. On Saturday, you're going to pick me up at 8 in the morning. We're going to go to Acton. You're going to drive, and you're going to buy me lunch. And I said, sounds great. Thank you. And he said, I'm going to help you with this. And so I go and pick him up in Brentwood, and he gets in the car, my Volvo wagon, and we drive to Acton, and there's a little fence around the property. We step over the fence, and there's chickens, and there's a trailer, and there's nobody there. And he said, okay, now you're going to take me to lunch. I said, cool. So he gets in the car, we go to lunch, we order burgers, and he says, you want nothing to do with this property. You are in way over your head. This is horrible. You do not want it. And he said, I'm going to help you. I said, oh, how are we going to do that? He said, let's call debtor. Let's call borrower and get him into the office. I said, great. So I call the borrower, and he comes into the office. He's dressed like a cowboy. And he gives us cards. It says insurance salesman. And he sits down, and he had been paying 7% on the note. And I said, and Ron says, all right. He schmoozes the guy. They're talking. They're laughing. It's just a normal day. And he says, okay, we're going to work out this deal for you and Ben. Okay. Ben, what do you want here? And I said, I want to up the interest rate to 10%. He said, I won't do it. And then I said, but he said, and Ron says, Ben, stop talking. I said, okay. And he says, okay. So we keep the interest rate at 7. Are you good with that? And he says, I'm good with that. And he says, can you pay your arrears? And he says, yes. I said, great, pay your arrears right now. He said, no problem. And he says, can you accelerate the payments? So instead of paying, $800 a month, you're paying $3,000 a month. He says, I can. And he says, great, we're going to extend you. And meanwhile, I'm kind of like, bah, 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 bah. And he's like, stop talking. And he negotiated this deal with a 10% late penalty. And I was paid back in about 18 months. And I paid for, a couple of years of law school with that.
I did a development deal that turned out not to be a development deal. And it was very creative. It was mostly created by my cousin, who had really a great negotiation and people skills, but we were in it together. And, it was the first deal in real estate that I made money. And I got a check in my first year in law school for $150,000. And I remember going to the bank, like I didn't have $1,500 to deposit. I never deposited $1,500 in the bank. And I went to the teller with that. I mean, it was like, it was euphoric.
It was euphoric.
It's $1 million.
You literally make a copy of the check and you want to frame it.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to go in, we're going to go to Wendy's, and then, we're going to go to the bank. I'm going to deposit $1 million check. I mean, that's what it felt like.
My first big flip, I deposited a $600,000 check.
Yeah.
$606,000. And I remember I could not in my life believe it. I could not believe it.
So you went from that experience.
And that was one of the experiences that made me want to go into real estate law, because I loved it. I was so excited. And then I took all these secured transactions courses and land use and all this other stuff. I became a real estate attorney, and I immediately went and bought an apartment building, which was not great, but I made a few bucks on it. I eventually got out of it. And I've bought others since, but I didn't start. So I always wanted to be an investor, and I was investing. I was putting money into property, but I wasn't doing it shockingly successfully. I mean, it was okay. It was kind of like, slow grindy real estate investing. When I started selling real estate as an agent, I would represent some builders, because that's kind of one of the holy grails of being a real estate agent is you get the listing up front, you get the listing on the second time when they go to sell it. But I would watch how much money they made, because I can do math. And I would see the money that those builders were making. And of course, they're taking risk. So risk is no small thing. But it was quite impressive to me, especially given the fact that it was my information that they were trading on.
Yes.
So I had a little bit of an outsized view of the actual nugget of value, but I do believe that the nugget of value is the information. That's what we trade on. I mean, in real estate, it's actually legal to trade on information that correct. That inside nobody else knows. Yeah. It's legal.
Correct.
And so, and there's many times when you know of a situation that nobody else knows about, and it's okay. And there's disclosure, and there's all sorts of, for example, one of my clients had a property tied up, and he tied it up. He's a neurosurgeon. He's a smart guy. And he does a lot of research. He tied up this property, and it was like such an amazing deal. And he starts wiggling on the property purchase. And I was like, why are you wiggling? And he says, I'm just wiggling. And it was in 2010, let's call it. And he says, I don't know if I like it. There's too much work to be done. And I was like, Bob. And so I'll tell you, the situation was the person who'd owned it had been a surgeon who was very into drugs. And he was a plastic surgeon. He had a bunch of Lamborghinis in the driveway, and he had died in the bathtub. Okay. And his estate was selling the property and it didn't look good and no one had fixed it up.
Sure.
And we were under contract for a price that I thought was amazing. I said, Bob, you scored. And he says, no, I don't think I want to buy it. It's like, well, would you mind if I take your position? And he said, sure. And so I called the listing agent and I said, do you mind if I take over this buy? And he said, not at all. I want to sell the deal. And so I took it over and I brought in a partner because I didn't have all the money. And I made a ton of money on that deal. And that was just everything was legal, but I had information that no one else had.
Okay, what was the information?
The information was the house was undervalued. They had already received probate approval without being contested at a certain price, and that they were desperate to get out of it. I mean, there was even further credits that were negotiated.
I cannot believe that I've been doing this for so long. I cannot believe that I've been hosting the podcast and I've had so many guests and all I do is think about real estate. And I go on somebody else's podcast and they're jamming me. Love her. She's top 2 or 3 podcasts in business. I'm on her network. Nicole Lappin, shout out to her. And she's jamming me on the, well, the S&P 500 does on average 10% and real estate on average does 4.5%.
Yeah, so why invest in real estate?
Defend yourself. And and these are not prepared questions, but I should be able to handle that question, and I'm doing the best I can. And I am gobsmacked that it's the first time that I've heard or thought of, just put that way, insider information is okay.
It's the only business that I know of where you can, and by the way, many times they want you. They are desperate to close that deal with you. You're doing everyone a favor. I had one this year where there was a mold situation and it had fallen out of escrow a number of times and the sellers were wanted out of the property. And I said, I'll even fix it for you. But they said, we just want to sell it and we'd like to sell it to you, Ben. You know everything about it. There's going to be no disclosure issue because I had gone through 4 escrows, 4 failed escrows. And they said, we'd like to sell it to you. And I said, we came to a number and I said, that sounds great. And they carried. And it was a great deal.
And it's a great deal.
And it was fine. And I think it's an imperfect, the information in many ways, there's humans involved and it's imperfect. And frankly, at the time, the buyers in escrow, we were telling them, you can have it at this deal. The deal that they ultimately gave to me. They ultimately offered it to me. But you can have it at this deal, just close escrow. And they said, no, we're nervous. There's mold. And fixing it up was not easy. All the drywall came out, all the flooring came out, all the subflooring came out. We hired Paul McGrath, who's great, to do all the ventilation. He put in 4 units in the basement or under the house. We did the roof. We did all sorts of things to make it right. And we compiled a binder. We did full remediation, separated into different zones. And I compiled a binder that was this thick about how this property was safe now. And by the time it went back on the market, no one had an issue with it.
It truly is amazing. And the first deal I did was this development deal. I credit mostly my cousin. The second deal, I bought a property with my business partner. We bought it on the auction steps with every penny that we had. How'd
that go for you?
Actually, it went great. I mean, we bought this. There's a great street in Pittsburgh called Beechwood Boulevard. It was on way too far out of the great section, but it was still on this great street. And we bought this house. It was a disaster. It was a single family home that was split into 3 units illegally. And there was like all these people in there and kitchens and all this kind of stuff. And we finally got everybody out of there. And our idea was to get everybody out of there, get the thing fixed up, and turn it back into this beautiful single family home.
Yeah.
That was the idea. We didn't get there because one of our childhood friends was like, hey, you know what? I've got a husband and we've got kids and we'd like to buy that and turn that into our home. And we got a huge profit. We didn't do anything.
It's every now and then good things happen. When you're in the game, good things happen. And
we had every penny to our name stuck in that one. And then we found this, there was a family trust. They had all these like beautiful properties and they had like the Total Dog, and the Total Dog had two major issues. One of them was, they didn't just have a dry cleaning, not just a dry cleaner, there was a dry cleaning plant. So there's
environmental issues, yeah.
Environmental. And then it was old school. There was 100, it was a big commercial and it had 100 units, and the units were these like six unit, like little townhouse things. And underneath the street, it was old school. It was all heated by boilers. There's this giant boiler under the street and the street is caving in. Okay. So between those two things, and so much of the property was going on at the same time. They were bidding up these like great properties, and you had to do your due diligence before. And so my business partner and I paid for the due diligence on those two items. We did a Circle of One or whatever it was. It came up clean. So we had the certificate. It was a guarantee. We were okay on that. We had sort of two paths to fix the heating plant and the street caving in.
In the sinkhole.
And we're like, okay, so, this is the cheapest we're going to get out of it. This is the most expensive we're going to get out of it. And even when we took the most expensive, we worked that way into the price, put times 5, reduce that from the price. And we had no money. We went to each of our brothers and we made millions of dollars on that deal over time.
The deal, that one deal, the one that I told you about, the $606,000 check that I put in, and that was not all profit, but it was a very profitable deal. That was an interesting deal that we bought a property. I had a client. I brought it to a client. I thought it was a good deal. And he said, Ben, I can't get a loan right now. This was in the tougher times. And he said, I don't have the credit to get a loan. And I said, I can get the loan. So we partnered up and we did this deal. We close on it. The day we close, there's a rain. It's in Beverly Hills Post Office, so it's at it's up on it's on Lieb Drive. I don't know if you know that street.
Sure.
It's that house just sold for like, I don't know, $12 million. We got that for $1.2 million.
Wow.
So we bought this house. The day we closed, someone behind who could be listening to a podcast like this, he had been doing unpermitted grading up above and had dumped dirt from a pad that he was grading into a canyon. The rain hit, the entire property flooded with mud, literally a foot deep in front of. So we close on it. The next day we go up there. We can't even drive in to the cul-de-sac. There's just mud. The street, the city cleaned it. We figured out how to deal with it. We figured out the drainage. I mean, it was. But we did really well on that property. We did really well. And that was in 2010. So that was a long time ago.
And just for clarity and safety, you can absolutely trade on insider information in real estate. And one of the things that you mentioned too was, especially if you disclose everything.
You have to.
Yeah,
you have to be very transparent, and you have to be like, I don't care about the deal enough.
Right.
To do anything that's not proper.
Yeah. When you stepped in for the neurosurgeon, you didn't have to tell. I don't know if you do or not. Maybe you do, but you told the other side. You said to the neurosurgeon, can I step in? Nothing weird. He says yes. Then you tell the agent, hey, you know what? I want to take over the deal. And they're like, your money's as good as his. Let's go.
Exactly. And I think if you go into things and have the conversation that you're nervous about having, that really, because sometimes you're nervous. I mean, I'm not nervous anymore about it because I have no investment in the outcome.
Right.
If it's not a good deal for everybody, I don't want it to happen.
Right. That's
actually. Right. And I think early on in my career, I would be like, oh my gosh, is this, I'm nervous about talking to people about my involvement. And now I'm on a podcast. I have no problem saying I also invest in real estate because actually, interestingly, for my real estate clients, this is really interesting.
Yes.
So not only for the buyers who understand that I know everything about the construction process, but also for the sellers who say, hey, maybe I don't want to spend real estate fees. Maybe I want to do a quiet transaction. And they know that I'm a potential buyer. I go to every single one of them and I say, listen, I have bought real estate. I've built houses. I've built a bunch of ground up houses by now. But that is potentially, if I like your property, if you like the money, if you like the price, that's available to you.
Absolutely.
But I advise that you go on the market. Because
absolutely.
If you go on the market, you will know for sure that you've gotten top dollar for this property. And that is my core mission as a real estate agent. Now, as a real estate investor, if there's a deal that works for you and that works for me, then we can make that deal.
Sure.
And so it's just like another tool in the toolbox, I think.
Sure. No, I think that makes perfect sense. And the other thing I would add is just, have the conversation. Don't be afraid to have the conversation. Like you say, there's lots of real estate out there. It's not going to make anybody angry, especially if you disclose it in front. Say, I could be the buyer. If that makes you feel weird, forget it. We won't, we'll go ahead and market it. And then the next piece is, as we're both lawyers, put it in writing.
You put it in writing. My disclosures are so awesome. I love my disclosures. And you know what? If it's something that I'm making disclosures, I actually have a lawyer that I used to work with at my firm. He's now my lawyer and he's a great guy. I send it to him. I say, hey, this is the situation. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this disclosure? And if he says, I don't like it or I like it, I listen to him. If he says, I don't like it, out. Out.
And the thing too is that, even the information, we call it insider information. A lot of times it's really not insider information. Not. What it is that you're willing to dig a little deeper than the next person. And that information is available to you. You have it. Nobody else has it because they didn't look for it. You don't have a public duty to say like, oh, I found this thing. It's actually, it costs less to fix this than you think. You've paid for that due diligence. So it's yours. What you and I and what our listeners can learn about a piece of property. And this is why, I've said it 1,000 times, but I have 3 rules. I've invested in real estate for 30 years. I've never lost money on a deal. And I have 3 rules.
That makes one of us.
Right. And you have these 3 rules. And even when I tell seasoned investors what the 3 rules are, and they're like, okay, fine. If you follow those, you're right. You'll never lose money. It's not like rocket science. And I follow the 3 rules, never lose money. So one of the rules is buy where you know. Okay.
100%.
Okay. So that's rule 1. So now you and I, we're looking at property that's local. So we know about the area. We know there's, we could get a surprise, not likely. And so you buy where you know. And then if you're already buying where you know, and now we're looking at a particular property. So can you imagine buying in Cheviot Hills? Like, how are you not going to know? Right. And now you take the particular property. Now you call the right inspectors in, There's no way that the best stock analyst on the planet could ever know a stock as well as that house in Cheviot Hills after you've had the inspectors come by.
So I'm going to tell you one that I just did. This is someone contacted me and said, would you be interested in buying my house? And I said, let's take a look at it. I looked up the stats online. I was like, that's a good one. I like this one. I like the lot.
What about it? What about it makes you, it's a good one?
The lot, it's a flat, big lot on a good location. I said, I like it. I could build a house there, a really nice 2-story, because I've done a lot of 3-story houses, big basement elevator houses. But it's a lot of work. It's more time, it's more money, it's more potential for shoring issues. So I said, I like this property. I go to meet with her. She's a former financial manager, I guess, a wealth manager. She was a wealth manager.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was a wealth manager for many years. Very smart, older woman, says, I'm going to tell you the story. She says, I want a particular retirement community. They have no space available. Okay. So what I need to do,
where this is going,
what I need to do is I need to sell this property to you or to somebody, and I need to have the unlimited ability to lease it back at a fair price. And I want to have a 30-day cancellation. Right. And I said, the answer is yes. No problem. I gave her all the comps. I gave her lawyer the comps. I gave her financial manager the comps. We all looked at it. We all looked at the contract, and everyone said, good to go. Bought it, closed it. She stayed. The retirement community had a space open 30 days later.
Right.
And I was counting actually on an 18-month rental.
Sure.
So now I have a vacant house that I purchased on a 1031 exchange, which means I need to rent it. I need to have it rented. So I have this vacant house, which I didn't inspect, by the way. That's why I brought this up, because you're talking about inspection. I didn't inspect the house because I wasn't concerned about the house. I was going to tear it down. But now I have this rental requirement, like kind for like kind. So, and if the viewers need explanation on that, I could talk about that. But it's, so I decide I'm going to rent it to a good friend of mine at a discount. This is my former assistant who just got married, and they're pregnant, and it's great. He's the greatest guy on the planet. And so I rent it to him. I clean it up. I put floors in. I paint it. The house looks good. They move in. Boom. Gas line breaks. Gas line breaks. Have you ever heard of that? Like $14,000. Oh, yeah. Boom. Sewer underneath the laundry room breaks. $12,000. I mean, it just keeps going. And he says, I feel so bad for you because I know you're going to tear this house down. I said, I made a deal with you to rent the house from me. I said, if you want to leave, I will give you back every penny that you've given me to date. And I hope the answer is yes. But if you want to stay, I'm going to make it good for you. And so I did. And he's living there and he's loving it. But I still feel like it was a good deal. Yeah. Even after all that.
Yeah. Because you can build that in.
It's fine.
Yeah. You figure out that's the thing about real estate. You can figure these things out.
Yeah.
Now, what advice do you give to people about a fix and flip? And I'm going to tell you, for example, I always, and I know you do the same thing, but I always say, I make the money on the purchase. Yeah. So I make the money on the buy, and I generally will not do the buy unless there's so much room in it that there's a lot of room for error, because I don't do fix and flip. I do a fix and hold. And then especially if I don't have investors, and that's changing because we're doing syndication. But I make the money on the buy, and then I just know it's going to work out.
Yes.
I would put my mom in it. I would put my brother in it. No problem. When you put an investor in it, you got to figure out okay, so we've got to make perfect use of the money and the timeline and everything else. But it's good enough that really I would put my brother in it. No problem. Cause I just know we're going to be fine. But what advice can you give someone when they're looking at a fix and flip? Because some of the deals that I see, even professionals doing, they're so tight. I couldn't do it.
My advice after doing this now for a long time is only buy deals with room, like you're saying. My other piece of advice is be very careful of expensive money. I get very concerned. I'll tell you, I had 8 projects going when the interest rate changed in 22.
I only had 4. So there you go.
Okay. So I had 8, and they were on construction loans. And construction loans are adjustable. They're floating loans. They went from 4%, and it was about 17 million in debt. It went from 4% to 10.5%. Very, very quickly. And I think that those are the moments that can sink you. So I think if I could give anyone some advice that, look, a lot of people who do fix and flip, they want to get in and they want to make that their sole, way of wealth, their sole method of wealth building. I think that you shouldn't do something that you can't quite afford.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of people who will buy these deals because they're optimistic and they're excited and they take a hard money loan for 90%. And I feel like that is they're setting themselves up for failure. And I also feel like they may be doing a lot of work for a very low return or no return. I think the debt is really important and the buy is really important. And I think if you can, I know a lot of people who, I know this one investor who, he's an investor and his wife has a really good job. It's a really nice match because there's some steady income and then he can do the investing and they've done very, very well. For me, I have to be both spouses in terms of having the day job and then having the fun creative job, but it's also very, very high pressure. I think investing is very high pressure. And I think people who don't acknowledge that, I mean, look, the first few deals you do, you don't quite realize what kind of risk you're under. If you do, you're never gonna do them.
Yes.
So I think the first few deals you do, you've got these rose-colored glasses. You're so excited. It's going to be amazing. And when you start hitting problems, well, you figure your way through it. And if you can, all right, maybe you do it again. I mean, you got through it because you're going to hit problems. But if the margin is too tight, those problems can sink you.
Yes.
And it's not just that asset. It's all your assets.
Cross-collateralized.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you hit my 3 rules, by the way.
I did.
And then in addition to the 3 rules, there's another thing too that I use, and you hit that also. So I said buy where you know, and you are buying properties that you really deeply understand.
Yes.
Rule 2 is the value add. It must be a value add property. And you hit that when you said there's got to be room in the deal.
Absolutely.
And so that's your value add. And the insider info, by the way, that goes hand in hand with that, because I always say, I call it brain damage. And that's
where you make your money.
It's a problem that somebody else doesn't want to figure out.
I feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
And actually as a real estate agent too, I was just talking to another agent who was like, I'm so scared to go to the seller and tell her that she's not going to get what she thought she was going to get for the property. And I said, you can't be scared of that. If the property has been marketed, then the market is speaking to her. You're not speaking with her. The market's talking with her. And really, when she came to you, she had a problem. The problem was she has a house that she doesn't want to own anymore. So if you can help her solve that problem, you're doing your job. The number is important, but it's not the only thing. There's other aspects to the problem that I think are important for you to handle. And that's why you're hired. And anyway, it's the same thing with investing. There are problems that if you can solve that problem, there's money in it, I guess. There's some sort of a profit in it.
Oh, for sure.
And solving a problem is hard. Many times.
Can be. Yeah.
If it's not hard, then you've lucked out. Then you've lucked out. But I think a lot of times you might think it's not hard and it becomes hard. And I think that I agree with you. I think that if there's hair on a deal, and I think inside information may have been sort of the wrong way to put it in some ways.
I like it. No, it's the first time I've heard it that way.
But I feel that because you can be, there's a small group of people who have the information, and everybody knows that only a small group of people have that information. But if you are willing to act on it and have the ability to act on it, and everybody understands what's happening, I think it can be really good.
So you also changed, this doesn't happen for me very often, because you also changed one of my other three. I've been teaching the three forever. And my three are buy where you know, it's got to be a value add, and it has to cash flow. And I let that morph a little bit, because people call BS on that, because they're like, you know what? You're never going to find something that cash flows in a market like LA. But I go, okay, fine. So we'll morph that one a little bit. It doesn't have to cash flow, but you've got to have a real straight line, not like change the entitlements in order to make it work. You've got to have like, okay, so I buy the value add, it's underwater, it's not cash flowing, but I have the money set aside and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And there's a very short, straight path to cash flow. And so that's how I let the third one go in terms of it has to cash flow. And that's how you make sure that you don't lose money. But guess what you said?
What did I say?
Which is to me, it's a nuance, because I've been teaching this thing for years. And what you said is what you can afford. And so that's really sort of what I meant when I said it has to cash flow, because the deal is not going to take you down if you can afford it. So I had a much less, dire problem, because I had 5 properties, not, I forget how many.
It was 8.
I had 5, not 8. And then my total outstanding debt was probably, just over 2 million. So it was a whole different ball game. But I'm like, I can afford it.
Worst comes to worst, I'm okay.
Here you go. No problem.
Be okay.
Yeah. Because I know that I had, and there was a lot of room in the deal. So I'm like, I know that I'm going to be able to fix these up. And sure, I bought it for 500. We were going to put 250 into it, and it should be worth
worst comes to worst, you break even, whatever.
But now it's like, oh, okay, whatever it's worth now, I still put the 250 in. I'm definitely at 750, 800. I'm fine.
You'll be okay. Yeah.
That's how you weather that storm.
I think being a real estate investor, I think there's a lot of courses. No money down. Get into real estate with no money down. Look, I'm going to tell you, I will bet you that 1,000 people who watch this have made money with no money down. That's not me. I have only done well when I have put my own skin on the line, and I have made a calculated,
Sure.
You put yourself on the line. You're on the chopping block, and it's risk. But in my experience, and a lot of this maybe comes from law school, from seeing, because I studied this California secured transactions in real property. It was the best course I've ever taken in undergrad, in law, anywhere, in high school, the best class ever. It was fascinating. It was so cool. And you see real people getting into real problems in case law. We studied only case law. You see real people getting into real problems because of debt.
Yeah.
And I think I had that ingrained in me. So the first apartment building I bought it with a partner. It was $535,000. Okay. And I put up my life savings, which was $100,000. And that's what I did. That's what I could afford. And we got debt on it. We cash flowed a little bit. It was kind of a mess.
Sure.
We ultimately made a few bucks on it.
Sure.
Sold it for $750 a few years later.
You're
Fine.
in the game.
We're in the game. So, but I think people underestimate the importance of having some capital to get in. And I maybe this is an unpopular point, but I think if you don't have the capital, I mean, you can go to friends and family and relatives and all this other stuff and raise money, which people do. And you can make a couple bucks, you can make a slice of the profit. But it better be a really juicy deal, or why are you doing it? Or why are you doing it? It's a lot of work.
I think you and I split the difference. Together we do. We have the same philosophy, and that is that I have to listen. I'll have to listen to Ramsey a few times instead of just think that I know what he says. He's very popular, and my understanding is that he sort of believes in no debt. And I understand that there's consumer debt and most Americans, the average American's getting crushed by consumer debt. And if you did no debt, you'd be better. And
You're going to say what I believe.
Yeah.
I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah. And then, so we're not going to go there.
You're talking good debt.
Yeah. We're not going to go there.
Good debt's good.
Yeah. And then we're going to go on the other side of it. I'm going to say, if I did not use debt, that I would have, 1/3 or less of the wealth that I currently have.
Other people's money is wonderful, but just be careful. To me, I consider other people's money mostly bank money, mostly big bank money that doesn't want your asset and doesn't want to hold you over a barrel with expensive debt. Right. They want you to, they're going to make you a loan, you're going to pay them back, and you're going to shake hands and say, thank you for the transaction. And to me, that's good debt, and that requires a down payment.
That's correct. And then otherwise, you're chasing it with
you're chasing it, and it's so much pressure, and you can pull it out. You can pull the rabbit out of the hat,
and these people do it, and we know it, and we've seen it, and we saw these people making gobs and gobs and gobs of money before 2008, and then 2008 came, and they had 18 projects going at the same time.
And they went bad.
Just so bad.
Yeah.
And, and I was sitting on the sidelines going I wasn't sitting on the sidelines going these guys are going to, get punched in the nose real good here. I was sitting on the sidelines going I'm so amazed by I can't do it, but what they're doing is crazy and good. And they're making, tons of money. And then when the crash happened, I was like, okay, so that's why I couldn't do it.
Large builder who was a client of mine. I mean, this is a good sort of example of just being creative as well. This is a client of mine. He's a builder. He was very big into leverage, and he would raise the equity portion, and then he would get hard money. And I think that it didn't turn out the way. Built a beautiful company that I don't think is profitable. But and you probably know the company I'm talking about. But I had another thought, which was, it was so brilliant. Oh, and it's gone. No, but I think that if you just methodically go forward and if there's something that's worth 10 and you can get it for 6, even if in your mind it's worth 10, and you can get it for 6 and you can put in $2 and sell it for 10, I think you can't lose.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, we could go on and on. And
I enjoy talking with you.
Do you know how many flips you've done, or how many?
I've done if you say flips, do you include ground up as well?
Sure, ground up. And also I would also include ones that you bought, fixed, and held. So
I've probably done 50.
Yeah.
50, 51.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was a lot. And some of them are expensive.
Yeah. Which makes me nervous, but
it makes me nervous. No, it makes me nervous. I mean, there's nights when I'm up. Yeah. There's nights when I'm up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. But you got room in the deal.
And when you're diligent, what's the word I want to say? We've been talking for so long. When you're, I guess, diligent, when you're methodical about your debt.
Yes.
You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay. And I think as long as you just be regimented about your debt position, I think you'll be okay.
And there are people that are going to get, I can see it in the front, not the rear view mirror ahead of us. 2026, $1 trillion worth of debt is going to mature. 120 billion of that
is 3%.
Was taken at, yeah. And that's going to create real problems, and it's going to create amazing opportunities.
I think that's right. That's why I think people like, probably like you, and hopefully people like me. I mean, I just closed one yesterday, which is a great one. And I have 2 more to close in the next 6 months. And then
let's get ready.
Maybe we'll do some together.
I'd love to.
That'd be fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.